Let's get to Alice Gaynor right now, who has been there basically from the first week of this trial, and she was in the courtroom this morning. Alice, can you talk to us about the mood when the verdicts were handed down?
Chris and Mary, I don't think I've ever been in a more silent courtroom. All you could really hear was the typing on keypads. There are a lot of journalists from all over the world here. The courtroom was packed mostly with journalists. The first two rows were set for the defense. There were some people here on Harvey Weinstein's side. There were some people here on the prosecution side. In the back two rows, you had members of the public here. We didn't notice any of the women who testified in the back row here today, but we are sure they are paying close attention. Let's go over the charges right now. He was found not guilty of predatory sexual assault. That was the top charge against him. He was facing up to life in prison for that. What this means is that they doubted the testimony of Annabella Sciorra. In the past few days, they've sent numerous notes to the judge requesting readback of testimony regarding Annabella Sciorra. They wanted readback of testimony from Rosie Perez, her actress friend, who testified that Annabella told her about the alleged rape back when it happened in the early 90s. He was also found guilty of criminal sexual act. That was for Mimi Haley. She says that in 2006, he forced a sex act on her. So this shows that the jury did in fact believe her for this one. He was also found not guilty of rape in the first degree, but was found guilty of rape in the third degree as it relates to Jessica Mann. Now, one interesting thing, they asked for a lot of testimony regarding Mimi Haley as well as Annabella Sciorra. They did not ask for any readback, any other evidence or testimony presented at trial regarding Jessica Mann. So it sounds like they had their minds made up about her rather quickly. Going back to the courtroom, when the verdict was read, right before the verdict was read, we got a note from the jury. It said, "We, the jury, have reached a verdict." A lot of scrambling was going on. You had about 15 court officers enter the courtroom, blocking the entrances, just really outlining the entire courtroom should anything get disruptive. But again, it was utter silence when they read that verdict. It was very hard to see what Harvey Weinstein's reaction was. He had about 3 court officers surrounding him. The prosecution wanted him to be remanded immediately. The defense was arguing he is a man who is unwell. He's under the care of about 5 doctors, currently has a monitoring bracelet. They were arguing for house arrest. They say he needs to see these doctors. The judge said he was taken into custody, he was remanded, and he will be sentenced on March 11th. We saw him struggle. The officers weren't quite sure how to help him up, how to cuff him. The judge said he would make sure that he was put into an infirmary where he is being brought to be placed behind bars. But again, we could not see any reaction from him. We know in talking to some of his defense attorneys earlier today out in the hallway while we were waiting for a verdict, some of them did appear to be pretty antsy, pretty nervous. When Harvey Weinstein entered the courtroom hallway today, usually he says his typical good morning. We really don't get much of a reaction from him. He didn't appear, to be nervous, to be upset, anything like that. He just walked into the courtroom, not sure if he had any idea of what would await him today. He has once again been taken into custody. We will find out his exact sentencing on March 11th. I want to go over the sentencing so you can get an idea of what he's facing. Again, he was not convicted. He was found not guilty of predatory sex assault. That was the top charge. That would have put him in jail possibly for up to life. Now, the criminal sexual act in the first degree, that charge, it's a minimum of 5 years. It's a maximum of 25 years. As for rape in the third degree, it could be conditional discharge. So he may not get anything for that. The maximum for that is 4 years. But once again, for the criminal sexual act, he's facing up to 25 years in prison. So March 11th, that is when we will find out just how long he'll be sentenced for. And don't forget, he's still awaiting charges he's got to face over in Los Angeles once he is done here in Manhattan. Chris and Mary?
Alice, you had a question for Harvey Weinstein and as he was leaving court last week, and you asked him whether he was worried. Can you tell us what his answer was to you and an overall feeling of what his reactions were throughout this trial?
That's right. I asked him last week, are you worried? And he really just shook his head. It depends on the day. Sometimes he'll answer questions that the media shouts out to him. Some of the questions are a little bit ridiculous. Some of them are general, how are you doing? And he'll typically say he's feeling good. We never get any sort of outrageous reaction or outrageous response from him. One thing we were all noting the past couple of days, he would sort of stop and pause in front of the cameras and joke around like, did you get the shot? Did you get the shot? So if he was worried, he certainly wasn't showing it. But again, he's hunched over the walker. He sort of has the same expression on his face as he comes and goes every day in the courtroom. You know, last week when the jury sent the note to the judge saying, you know, asking for more clarification on if they were to be hung on a couple of charges, and the defense attorneys seemed actually sort of pleased when they saw that note, but we were told, you know, anything could happen. And I think if you talk to anyone who was sitting in that courtroom as a spectator and listening to the trial, a lot of people were actually surprised to hear that the jury was stuck on Annabella Shiora's testimony, that they had doubts about that. So this verdict is a little bit surprising in that sense because people weren't necessarily expecting it to go that way. But again, you never know what the jury is thinking, and we're hoping to catch up with some of the jurors later today. When they went through the verdict, they did go individually after the foreman gave the verdict. You know, do you agree with this? Is this what you say? They all said yes, yes, yes.
Alex, just to kind of play off of what you were talking about there, with the letter being brought to Judge Burke on Friday of, you know what, we could be hung on these charges here. You're in that courtroom with these throngs of media members, lots of legal experts and whatnot. Did anybody have any sense which way, or was it kind of a 50-50 down the middle of, it could go this way, it could go that way, thus lending to the fact that it was so silent when the verdict was read today? Was it a shock, do you feel, or is this something that people kind of thought this was how it was going to play out?
I think there were all kinds of scenarios that people came up with Friday once that note was brought out. You know, these charges, the verdict sheet, if you read it, we do have it up on CBSNewYork.com. It's pretty confusing, and quite a few times the jury wanted legal definitions read to them. They wanted the charges read to them again because they seemed to be struggling with how to proceed on the verdict sheet and what exactly everything meant. You know, when it comes to rape in the first degree, rape in the third degree, there is a difference between the two charges. Obviously, they wanted definitions on consent and other legal definitions regarding to the charges there. So back to Friday when they sent that note, you know, so many people had different opinions as to where it would go. People were saying, you know, it sounds like they're doubting Annabella Shiora's testimony, and that is certainly actually what played out here. They, in that note, said Friday that what if we are unanimous on the other charges, and so now we know what they came to on those other charges. So again, a lot of people are shocked with how this went because Annabella to them seemed pretty credible up there. Rosie Perez's testimony backing her up seemed pretty credible because when you compare her to some of the other women, you know, Jessica Mann got on the stand, and when it came to her rape that she says happened in 2013, again, he was found guilty on that, but when she testified, she said she was so embarrassed. She didn't tell the two people she was with on that trip out of embarrassment, and the defense went and called those two people. Her former roommate, former friend, Talita Maya, she was up there on the stand, and one of her agent friends, and both of them say, no, we didn't know anything about this rape. So really, there was no forensic evidence in this case. There was no DNA. Really, jurors were going off of some emails. They were going off of testimony. There was really no smoking gun, shall we say, when it comes to this case, and this is what the jury came up with.
The Manhattan DA, Cy Vance, calling the former movie producer a vicious serial sexual predator. We understand that he has been taken out a side door with his hands cuffed in front of him. And I was wondering, Alice, if you've heard from the defense at all and whether they are considering an appeal.
Have not heard from them yet. I think they're trying to make sense of what happened here. I know over the weekend they were going all kinds of possibilities. You know, we did ask Harvey Weinstein, did you get any arrests this weekend? He didn't answer that question here. I would imagine the defense would appeal, but again, we have not heard from them. Not sure if they've come out to the podium over there. They've been pretty chatty this whole entire case. As you know, Donna Rotuno, his lead attorney, she's talked to the media multiple times, was even scolded by the judge. She wrote an op-ed in Newsweek. She also gave an interview with 60 Minutes Australia. She gave an interview with a podcast for the New York Times. So we're just waiting to see if they're going to go ahead and talk to the media. He does have 5 lawyers that he hired for this case here. So at any minute, we should probably have some clarification on that.
What's going on behind you right now, Alice? We see a little commotion back there. Are those just cameramen right there, or are those more people emerging from the courthouse down the steps?
There are so many people here at the courthouse. You know, just to give you a little perspective, when we come to Manhattan Criminal Court here for usual cases and trials, we don't have these barricades up. We don't have as many court officers directing us out here. They are very strict. They've been strict this entire trial because obviously it is a high-profile trial, and you have a lot of people, a lot of spectators just standing out here wanting to know what's going on with their cell phones as well. Let's see if we can I'll just step out of the way so you could see. Al, I don't know if you need to move the camera at all, but you could just see people waiting over in the distance there. That's where the podium is set up over there. Typically, Gloria Allred, who represents Typically, Gloria Allred, who represents quite a few accusers, she'll go to the podium and she'll say something. I know, as you mentioned, we already heard from the Manhattan DA, Cyrus Vance. He spoke just a short time ago, so just waiting to see if the defense is going to have anything to say. They might be trying to gather their thoughts right now because, again, unclear if this is the verdict they expected. You know, there had been talk earlier, halfway through the trial, you know, there's a chance he could walk. I mean, really anything could have happened here. But once again, the defense has to be fairly pleased with themselves since he was not convicted. He was found not guilty on the top charge, but once again, he was found guilty of the lesser charges, and that could mean up to 25 years in prison. Chris and Mary?
Those 2 counts of predatory sexual assault carried a potential of life sentences, as well as the first-degree rape count as well. Many years in prison for that one. But as we took a look at the crowds from Chopper 2 and on the ground in front of you, Alice, we could understand since more than 80 women, including famous actresses, have accused him of sex assault. And he's still facing additional charges in L.A. as well.
That's right. We heard from one of those accusers here at trial. You know, she was brought in. They called a Molyneux witness. So 6 women testified in this trial, but he was only facing charges related to 3 of prior bad acts. So we heard from Lauren Marie Young. She is a model, and she is charging Harvey Weinstein with rape out in Los Angeles. She described a time back in 2013 where she was led up to a hotel bathroom. Unbeknownst to her, she claimed he was in front of her. Another woman was behind her. She thought they were going to talk about scripts and something else. Before she knew it, she was in a bathroom. She says that the door was shut on her by this woman, and then all of a sudden, Harvey Weinstein allegedly sexually assaulted her. In that case, the defense brought the woman in, Claudia Salinas, who Lauren Marie Young says shut that door. She sat down for the defense and said, never happened. Don't know what anyone's talking about here. So it'll be interesting to see how the charges do play out in Los Angeles. We did get a bit of a preview for that since Lauren Marie Young was brought in here to testify. But once again, he was only facing charges regarding here in this case in Manhattan.
Alice, and I'm not assuming that you have the answer to this question, but I'll ask it anyway. Any idea about the timeline for that Los Angeles case now that you've kind of given us a little bit of a precursor of what to expect in that? Any idea when that might take place? I know they were waiting for this case to wrap up before announcing the timeline there. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, that's a good question, Chris. So we've had a lot of downtime in the hallways, you know, while the jury's been deliberating for the past nearly week. So just in speaking to some of his defense attorneys, he doesn't seem to, I'm just keeping my eyes peeled to see if any defense team members come out. So excuse me there. So we've been talking to a lot of the defense team members in the hallways, and we don't think he has his legal team put together yet for the LA cases. They very well could have the team together, and they're just not saying. But according to them, that has not yet been put together. At the very earliest, they predict he wouldn't face any sort of trial there until the fall. But again, that's just them, talking with us here in the hallway. So nothing concrete for the LA charges as of yet.